We're pretty punctual, Ralph. I'm kind of proud of us.
We are punctual. Yeah, we show up early, and what did Vince Lombardi say? On time is late, early is on time, something like that. We've been early, so we're on time here.
Yeah, well done us.
Good job on you scheduling it 15 minutes early.
I just want to make sure I don't screw anything up. If you're joining us, I see we've already got some live viewers. Really appreciate y'all being here. The point of this is for you, to be honest with you. If you're not watching live, we still love you, and we'd love for you to join us live, but we really want to be able to chat. So you're going to notice if you're on your desktop, there's a chat window on the right-hand side. If you're on your mobile, there's a little icon underneath the video that says live chat. Chat in your questions. You've got Ralph here who, you obviously don't do any hourly billing, Ralph, but if you did, I bet you would be in the many thousands of dollars an hour. So the people listening and watching this have the opportunity to engage in some pretty amazing free consulting. And we're doing that because we want the opportunity to drive our podcast. So please chat your questions. If you're watching the recording, join us live. We do this every Friday. It's 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And we haven't promoted this yet, right, Ralph? This is kind of all still beta trial stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what did you say, that next Tuesday on the podcast, I mean, every Perpetual Traffic episode drops on Tuesdays in iTunes and Spotify and everywhere else where you get your podcasts, which is what everybody says now. So Tuesday this coming week is the first one where we say, hey, join us on Perpetual Fridays. We used to call it Ask Me Anything. So that's good. So we sort of work out the bugs for 3 or 4 weeks here, which we appreciate all you guys hopping on. We've had a fair number of viewers for this thing the last few weeks, which has been great. We renamed it, retitled it, rebranded it Perpetual Fridays, which I love. Shout out to, I think, Matt Douglas who gave that one. So this is a good opportunity, the last one before we hit mainstream. And Perpetual Traffic has been pretty successful over the course of time, and we've got 7 million plus downloads, and 20,000-30,000 show up for every single week. Usually about 10,000 almost within the first day or two. So as soon as this goes out on the podcast, you might not have a chance to get your questions answered. And you mentioned something which I thought was interesting, which I just remembered. About 3 years ago, we had in the middle of our website, we had book a call with Ralph for an hour consultation. And, at first it was kind of a joke. It was like, all right, for $250, you can talk to me for an hour and I'll give you time. And it filled up my calendar. And then we raised it to 500, filled up my calendar again. And then we raised it to 1,000, which is, I'm kind of embarrassed to say. And I didn't have any space in my calendar, so we stopped and pulled it down, which is nuts when you really think about it. But we ended up on those calls not talking Facebook ads. That was the funny thing, Kasim, is that it wasn't anything around so tell me how you set up your campaign. It's how does the ad amplifier really work at level 3 or whatever it was? Some tactical thing. It was more talk to me about my business and my offer and how do I grow and scale and all those sorts of things. So don't feel the need that you need to ask advertising type questions, to me and Kasim here. I mean, anything business related, that's the stuff I think that really drives us. Because at the end of the day, we run agencies to help businesses grow and scale. And really, from my perspective, it's to help businesses reach their online potential, which when we do that, there's nothing better in my mind. I think that's the reason why we do this. And advertising and marketing and digital marketing is just the pathway in which to do that. So fire away at your questions, whatever it happens to be. And we'll, because this is time for you guys. And then obviously it's a great way for us to interact with the Perpetual Traffic audience, because when we do this in our basements and we're I don't really know what people want. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of live component to it. So I think it's a lot of fun for both of us, and looking forward to continuing to do these each Perpetual Friday.
I get a kick out of them. We got a comment, Digital Planner. Hello from Kentucky. Thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all giving your Friday morning to us.
Yeah, for sure. Hello to Kentucky. And I think Molly Pittman, who used to be the host here, is back from Amsterdam and living full-time in Kentucky, got an office building And so she's like building out the digital marketing community in Kentucky. So be sure to look her up. Digital Planner Co.
Is she still with Ezra? She's still doing the.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's the CEO of his company, right? Like, I mean, just took the whole thing over.
She is. Yeah. So she left DM, did some stuff for a while, worked with us for a little while. Ultimately, she really wanted to not necessarily run her own business per se. I think she enjoyed doing a lot of stuff with like messenger bots when that was kind of the hot thing, and then realized, that's not really where my passion is. And I think her real passion is working with really ethical, people who are very interested in not just making money, but doing good in the world. And Ezra Firestone is one of those dudes. So they're very compatible and in sync as far as like what their vision is and how they want to market themselves. And obviously Ezra's super sharp, especially in the e-com space, been on Perpetual Traffic a number of times. So it was a logical progression for them to work together. And John Grimshaw also was with DigitalMarketers with them as well. So they've got a pretty powerhouse team over there at Smart Marketer, and Boom by Cindy Joseph, and a bunch of other brands. And so she's doing great. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Good for her. Ezra pissed me off the other day. He and I both spoke at the same event. We were at Affiliate Summit East in New York. Yeah. And when I spoke, I thought it went pretty well. Like I had a pretty full house and a couple of empty seats, but not too many. And I get off the stage feeling good about myself. And then, flash forward the next day, Ezra goes up and they're like bringing extra chairs in and there's standing room only and he gets a standing ovation. And it was just a very solid reminder of where I am in the world, like where I rank.
Oh God, that's so funny. That same thing happened to me when I was ahead of, I think it was Frank Kern at TNC once. Like people were filing in. Everyone that was in my talk was still there and they just stayed for his, but there was like this mad rush of the door in the back. We walked by each other and high five. So I was like, yeah, not quite there yet. Not quite as big as Frank.
I like Kern. He's just entertaining. He's a comedian. We've got some questions rolling in. So Digital Planner says, I think figuring out what your customer niche is and what your customers want is one of the hardest parts of starting up a business or a brand. Man, I couldn't agree. It's funny. I did a presentation for DigitalMarketer yesterday on finding your niche. And I've got a pro tip here if you'll take it. And I don't know if you're asking for advice or making a comment, but my tip would be, I like to view it as crosshairs, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for using a hunting analogy. But if you're out hunting, if you're going to aim, you need an X and a Y axis. And far too often they're aiming along one axis alone. And here's what I mean by that. Your offering, your product or service is your X axis. And what that does is, you could offer any one of these things. You're going to narrow that down in whatever realm it is that you're in to 1, 2, or 3 boxable offers. You can put them on a box, scan them, price them, shelve them. You're productizing your offering. And go out and offer that to a handful of different industries. Once you've done that, you're going to figure out which industries you like the most. And that's your Y-axis. And so now I can offer this box to all these people, and I'm going to narrow down. So you've narrowed down your offering, you've narrowed down your avatar, and that gives you your crosshairs. Now, this isn't done overnight. It's done over time. But narrow your service down first, my soft opinion, and then narrow down your industry second. And only narrow down your industry after you've worked with a handful of industries and you really get a sense for who's who, because it's not just about profitability. You have to love. If you niche down to a specific industry, you have to fall in love with that industry. I've got an agency that serves Montessori schools. I'm obsessed with Montessori. It feels really good to get up every day and help those people. If I had niched down into personal injury attorneys, I'd hate my life every single day. So any input or advice on that, Ralph, in the niche world?
I'm curious I'm going to answer a question with a question here, but I'm curious how you found your niche and what you do. Obviously there's the Montessori element, which is sort of it's a part of what you guys do, but did you ever figure out, all right, this is, because from our conversations, you have a diverse group of customers. Like, how did you guys do it? And was it a conscious decision, or did you do it? Like, sort of bringing it back to the question here. I'm very curious.
So I just fail at everything, and my life story has been failing forward. To steal from John C. Maxwell, I had a Me Too agency. So Solutions 8 is called Solutions 8 because we had 8 core service offerings. We did web and software and SEO and PPC and video, and I mean it was content, graphic design. It was a joke. And I'm not slandering anybody because I know that's where most marketing agencies start, but we tried to do everything. And what I noticed is every time, I'd start cutting off services because it just became too difficult to manage. I was basically running 8 different companies. And I mean, I had the staff. I had a full-time videographer, editor, graphic designer, but it's just hard to be the best at everything. So every time I would cut off a service, we'd actually become more profitable. And it was my business partner, my now business partner, who identified that the people that were successful with Google Ads were the ones that lasted the longest. They retained the longest. And so really it took me, I started my business when I was 20. So it took me 16 years to figure out like, oh, if I niche down from a service perspective, I can A, get really good at that service. And then B, now I actually have a scalable model that's repeatable. I know who I need to hire. I know what my systems need to look like. Before we scaled down our service offering, every client that came in through the door, the question wasn't like what we offer is what do you need? And then we would just sell them whatever they needed. But now I had a whole new custom marketing implementation, and we were smart enough to figure it out. We did good work, but it was just so stressful. So it happened on accident, I guess is, that was a longer version, Ralph. I'm sorry.
No, well, I think that's a natural progression. And this does bring it back to, our story as well. And the question that's being asked here is that when you first start a business, it's like you just need customers. You need somebody to pay the bills.
I just need money.
I just need money. I'll take anybody and everybody. And I pretty much started, I don't know if that's the right way. I mean, I think now that, hindsight is always 20/20 here, and the past is prologue and all those great things. But if I were to do it again, I would niche down to scale up. I did not do that here at Tier 11. I mean, the parent company is called Antares Enterprises, which was like a lot of other things. But anyway, but Tier 11 is basically as an agency where we focused on, our first focus was Facebook and Instagram ads. But that was a novel concept back in 2010, 2011, 2012, in those years. So, and that's what we did. But prior to that, I was just taking on anything and everything that I could, because I was like, I can't work for somebody else. I was fired twice from the corporate world. We've told this story many times. And, I just realized that there's no way that I can work for anyone else but myself. And I kind of wanted to figure out a way to do this where I could just work alone, work on my own, maybe just have a couple of people and just make enough to, contribute. And that was my goal. I wanted to pay the health insurance. I wanted to be able to pay at that point in time the mortgage, and like each step, like for me, because my wife was working, she had a company, still has the same company, and it was going really, really well. And I was, in essence, sort of taking charge of handling the kids, but trying to do this at the same time. So I was taking on any business that I could. And so I took on web development stuff. I mean, I took on, then the next thing was, because everyone needs a website at some point in time. This is sort of a common way in which a lot of digital marketing agencies really do get involved. And what they do now is like they start off as a web dev. I think we were talking to our friend Tyler this week about that. It's like everyone starts there and then they're like, oh, how do you get traffic? Oh, well, all right. So then you figure out SEO, and then, well, SEO is kind of sucks, unless you're really good at it and really smart. So the easy way is paid traffic. And so that's how I evolved. And I evolved eventually from just wanting to pay the bills. And I remember the account that I got, which was an SEO account. It was a local roofer here on Cape Cod. And he was going to pay me, I think, $1,800 a month. And I'm like, oh my God, that is our mortgage. Like we had a really big mortgage at that point in time. So, and I could maybe pay a little bit to the principal. I was so excited. I was like in tears. And I came home, I told my wife, I was like, yeah, he just signed this agreement. Like I can pay the mortgage. Like that was my goal. So I think when you're starting, it's survival, really. Yep. But if you have an idea, you say, all right, well, once I get past, like there's the hierarchy of needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like first off, like, food, shelter, like the big essentials. And then you finally get to the point where you're you're self-actualized, which I know I'm not there yet. But anyway, you got to cover those things first. So I think to start off, if you just do take a lot of business from a lot of different places and figure out what you really like doing while getting paid to do it, I don't think that's such a bad path. Is it the path I would choose now and what I advise people on? No, but that's what I did. And it worked out well. What I realized is that I hated web development. I couldn't stand it. It was so much scope creep. Then I realized SEO, when there was link wheels and backlinks and, I was doing all this crazy stuff with Pat Flynn and all these other sorts of things. And then that changed. Then SEO, I was like, well, paid ads are actually really good. And there was Taboola and there was like these other sort of places where you could buy, traffic. And then I was like, yeah, look at the traffic I'm actually getting for you in my SEO. But it was actually, I was paying like bucks a day for some of these display networks. I'm like, well, advertising is really the way to go. So I pivoted that way, pivoted to a lot of different platforms. Google AdWords, pay-per-click, was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month as an affiliate there. And then found Facebook ads. And when Facebook started putting ads in the newsfeed, off the right-hand rail, I was like, holy crap. Like, that's the thing. And so I focused all my efforts on that. So what I tell people and what I actually did are not one and the same, but it arrived me at the same spot. And then we kind of rode that, Facebook and Instagram ads wave to the point now where we're now rebranding ourselves to a certain degree. So it's an evolution over time. But if you have if you have some experience in the space or whatever it is that you're doing, and you do a lot of different things, you're going to figure out quickly what you like and what you don't like doing. And I do think that is the benefit of just being sort of a, solutions 8, where you have 8 different things and then you kind of focus on the one that you really do enjoy and ultimately become a real specialist in that, which is what you guys have done. And we've done it on our side as well.
Yeah. Well, to your point, had I niched down early, it would have been in web dev, and I hated web dev too. So I never would have found Google ads if I didn't run around, kissing a bunch of frogs. So
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's like you gotta.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ralph.
No. I think you have to kiss frogs.
Yeah. That's really entrepreneurship, on so many levels, with, staffing, vendors, clients, services. We're just running around making out with frogs all day.
Pretty much. And falling on your face all the time. And just, I think that's just business. It's like,
there's a book there for us: Frenching Frogs and Falling Down.
Speaking of frogs, I have this picture. I should probably leave it in the the podcast show notes. It's a picture of this crane. The crane is in a bird, eating a frog, and its frog is in its mouth, but the frog is strangling the crane's neck as it's being devoured. And it says, "Don't ever give up." And that's literally right there. As I'm looking at your screen, it's right there. And and that's business.
Yep.
But that's life. And it's not to get too philosophical here, but I mean, you're going to deal with a lot of shit as a business owner. And it's sorry, but your job as a business owner, as a human, is to solve problems, really. That's all you're going to be doing. If you're the only people that don't have problems to solve are in the graveyard, so yeah. So I mean, as a business owner, you're constantly sort of figuring out which problems are the ones that I enjoy solving. And if you can do that in a business like ours is helping grow and scale businesses through, digital marketing, advertising, paid advertising, whatever it happens to be. I always sort of figured if I could learn how to do that, I always know that I'm going to have people that are going to want to employ me or figure out a way to work with us. So, and that's where we ended up landing.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded answer.
That was good. I like that we got philosophical. It makes me feel it's Friday morning. Let's dive into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. First of all, Mark, this is the second time I'm seeing you. So thank you so much for coming back. That's awesome. Appreciate you. And Mark said, did you guys hear about the new Bed Bath & Beyond flagship store launch? Do you think something similar could be implemented on a mom and pop level? I have not heard about that. Ralph, do you know anything?
I don't. Flagship store.
I'm Googling it.
Okay.
Bed Bath & Beyond remodeled its New York City flagship store. So I bet you, if I were to guess before I open this up, they're probably going smaller, right? So instead of the 40,000 square feet they used to have, they're going to try to figure out the Amazon store thing at 1,200. And we will see. Mark, let me know if you have more context. Yeah, for nearly 3 decades, the roughly 92,000 square foot location. Wow. 450 Bed Bath & Beyond locations. Man, I just, gosh, I hate to use the word pity, but I'd hate to be them right now. You know, tough spot. It's such a commoditized offering. Like, you know, places like Leslie's Pool Supplies, I actually think that can stick around. Yeah. And I think it can stick around because you sort of, it's like you need it. You also want to get there and actually talk to a human. But the stuff at Bed Bath & Beyond, all I do when I'm anywhere, like if I go to Best Buy, I just like playing with it, but then I instantly look it up on Amazon and always find it about 10% cheaper.
Yeah. I guess I understand the question now. And it's funny because I bought a Aeron chair for our video studio. I've always wanted one. And the only place I could find one is not in like the big box stores, not anywhere else, but it is in these Design Beyond Reach. Anyway, they have, in essence, flagship stores, small stores. They don't carry anything. They have no inventory. Like they probably have, you know, warehouses like Amazon does somewhere else. But I mean, their footprint, which this was in Harvard Square in Cambridge, which is a pricey market. Like it was small. It was, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 square feet, something like that. Maybe more, maybe 4,000, but definitely not 40,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever, like a, you know, a Walmart is. It's like hundreds of thousands of feet. And I thought the model was really as a hybrid between online and retail. It's like, I didn't want to buy this chair because they're really expensive and they're really comfortable, by the way. Definitely, if you can afford one, get one. I want to get one for here for this office. But the point is like the only way that I couldn't buy it online necessarily. I could, I suppose, but you have to like sit in it. Yeah. So it was like a fitting for the chair, and like all their furniture that they were selling in there was, some of which was office furniture, some which was like home furniture, was the same way. And I was like, this is a brilliant model. And then I started seeing it sort of more and more. There's a place kind of near where we have this other studio, is another place called West Elm. You know, it's a furniture store. We bought like a bunch of things for like that studio. It's like, you can't get anything unless it's like the floor model, but they won't sell you the floor model. So you have to order it, and then it's a month, 2 months, 3 months delivery, whatever it happens to be, longer for some pieces. So it's like this hybrid Amazon / retail model. And I think Bed Bath & Beyond is sort of waking up to that from what it seems like from that Google search. And I do think there's always going to be validity to going into a store, but going into a store that's 100,000 square feet with millions and millions, if not tens of millions of inventory on the shelves, that's just sitting there, you know, waiting to be sold that day. I don't know if that model works long term because of the Amazonification of, you know, retail in general. So that's just my thought. But
so to Mark's question, do you think something similar could be implemented on a mom and pop level?
I think it could be. I think it absolutely could be. I guess it would sort of depend on what the mom and pop level is, or what, you know, the business is.
Yeah, that's right. It would depend on the product. If you've got a Me Too product, you know, and I'm not trying to slander anybody, but I think you're gonna have a tough shake at it no matter what. But if you've got something like Ralph just said, I needed to see, feel, touch, and sit in this chair, then I think definitely.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you sort of see it with. Look at what Apple did. Like Apple started off just basically all online and then went to retail, you know, sort of backwards that way. I think if I were starting a business right now, I'm a mom and pop retail store, I would want to, if I have a unique product mix, something that is different than what's out there, I would get myself online ASAP, if not sooner. I mean, I think COVID all taught us that. Like businesses that didn't evolve didn't really survive. And there were some, I would say probably a half a dozen customers who came to us right in the middle of the pandemic. And they're like, well, our retail is for shit right now and all our restaurants are closed, but we've got this, this whole business that we've never marketed through our Shopify store. Can you guys help us? And they're a legitimate business that was really in a time of need. So they had the asset there. They just didn't really know how to use it. But I think, a lot of places that did not move online didn't end up making it. And there's dozens and dozens of restaurants in Boston, for example, that did not make it. Like there's entire rows of restaurants. Like we go into the city and we walk around like, holy crap, there's so many restaurants that are out of business. Like how could they evolve? They didn't evolve. There's some businesses that did, that said, all right, I'm going to get like Toast Tab and I'm going to go, I'm going to digitize my business, even though it's a physical location. Like there's a place right next to us where we are in Brookline. It's like, they're probably doing more business now because they evolved in the middle of the pandemic to a takeout place with a really easy to use, like Toast Tab app. If you ever used it, I don't know if you have that in Arizona. Anyway, it's like super easy. It's just like click, 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 boom, doom. And then like they text you, text message, you are ready. Your order is now being prepared. I mean, it's the same thing as like Uber Eats and everything else, but it's like this way in which they did it. I know Google had a solution as well. You probably can speak to that. But that's like the evolution of the business. And now they have this hybrid model now that everything's back. I'll bet you their business is more successful today as a result of COVID than it ever was. Like it exploded. And you see everybody walking around my neighborhood with the Tate, cafe bags, like it's the most popular place around because they figured it out and some didn't. And those shuttered restaurants, it's too bad that they didn't. But I think you just have to evolve as a business. And I think, a pandemic might force you to do it sometimes.
Well, this sounds callous. Obviously, I think there were a lot of COVID casualties that would have been fine sans COVID. But there were a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses that I think all COVID did was accelerate the inevitable. They were on the out anyway, and maybe they had a decade left. And COVID just amplified their inefficiency to a point to where, this was gonna happen one way or the other. Because there were some folks holding on that, I didn't see much in the way of a future for them.
Yeah. What examples would you choose there? Like,
so it's a lot of like, traditional retail. We had some clients in the furnishing space, the home furnishing space, and it's one entity that owns multiple brands, and some of the brands do okay. And now that I'm thinking about it, what's so funny, man? The brands that do okay have a smaller brick and mortar footprint, and then they use that as like the conduit. It's like the hub and spoke system. Yeah. But then they've got some, like outlet type stores that every year when we look at the numbers, it was just like, 3% atrophy, 6% atrophy, 4% atrophy, whatever. And they were still making money. And I think a lot of that had to do with just the fact that they had the base that they had. They'd been there for 60, 70, 80 years. But then when COVID came, it was a bloodbath. Like there was just nowhere for them to go and nowhere for them to pivot. And I was talking to my buddy about this when they shuttered. It just wasn't a surprise. I felt like that was going to happen no matter what. COVID just sort of, like the internet has already killed a bunch of businesses. They were zombie businesses anyway. They were going to be dead in 20 years. And COVID just brought 20 years down to today. That got more morbid than I meant for it to do. We need a happy pivot here now.
Well, I mean, it's a shakeout and it's an evolution of business. I mean, it's like you look at business cycles. I mean, there was the Great Depression, there was the pandemic of 1918. Like there's big shakeouts that happen that shake up business. And that is the natural business cycle. Now, a pandemic, you say, well, that's a once in a lifetime event. Well, I would submit that it's going to be a few times in our lifetimes. But the point is like now know like what the potential impact of it, but that's the business cycle. And we saw it coming anyway with Amazon, like the Amazonification of retail to a certain degree. And there's, a lot of companies like Walmart will always probably be Walmart, I guess, but they have such massive scale. So they can, in some cases, the smaller businesses, like a situation like this. We had a customer that went completely out of business. They were an 8-figure business. They were a hybrid sort of online and in-store, couldn't pivot their business model in the pet space. They're out of business. Gone. Everybody laid off because of COVID. We advised them on how they could pivot, and we're like, they just couldn't do it, which is really unfortunate. So, yeah, is it morbid? I suppose, but it's like all's fair in love and war and business, I guess. Like business is kind of brutal sometimes, and that's why it's hard. What is it, like less than 4% or 3% of businesses get to the $1 million in revenue mark?
Yeah,
that's a long road. And then it's 0.01 or 0.05, at the 8-figure mark. It's because it's hard.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was 0.05 at the 8-figure mark. That's funny. Yeah, I'm hovering in between those two, so now I'm super motivated to go be the 0.05.
I think 5 million is like 1%, 1.5%, 2%, something like that.
Okay,
like that's pretty good. Like you're 99 percent where everybody else is not. It's a good spot to be in. And then, once you get to that level, you're like, oh, geez, now I got to get it to 8 figures. And then you get to 8 figures. You're like, oh, now I got to get to 9 figures, whatever. Yeah. But point is,
we're not appreciated as entrepreneurs. Like there's no being full.
Right. Content, but never satisfied. Right.
I will tell you though, man, I'm oddly optimistic now. Like after everything that we've seen in the last 18 months, I think that there's so much opportunity. And I think, some of that comes from the fact that COVID left a vacuum. Because a lot of these businesses that went out were serving a customer base that, when we're back to some level of stasis, is going to continue to want to be served. And I think that's true for almost every industry. Is a ubiquitous truth. So no matter what business you're in, I think that there's going to be a really fun and interesting rebound, and it's going to be really cool to see some of the innovation.
Yeah, and like there's business shakeouts like happening all the time right now, like in the Facebook space with this iOS thing, which we don't have to get into it today, but we've noticed like our lead flow is like doubled, because we're known as Facebook and Instagram ad agency. I'm not saying this to promote ourselves, but I'm saying like, if you're known as a Facebook and Instagram ad agency and people are having trouble with Facebook and Instagram, they're going to come to an agency for professional help. Right. So it stands to reason. We actually thought it was going to be the opposite. Like our lead flow would die because of this whole thing. But, so that's another like mini shakeout within my little niche. It's like everybody has that shakeout. Like for you, it's going to be this Flock update, and the Chrome update and all that sort of stuff that we had talked about, I believe was the last time we were on one of these. It's like there's always going to be little changes, and that's just a part of like the pandemic was a major change. Let's not kid ourselves here. But then there's always going to be all these other like industry specific changes that you just kind of figure out, like how are you going to overcome it? Going back to never give up with the frog strangling the crane's neck.
That is awesome. Have you heard of Performance Max by Google?
Have not.
We were just accepted to the beta yesterday. So brand new. But to the exact point that you just made, as far as like, the big changes and some of the impacts that they're going to have. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Do it.
Not to be annoying, but it's just so cool what Google's put together. And this is one of those things to where I was always worried that Google was trying to replace agencies. And I know for a fact they are trying to replace agencies. But then they roll out these products that are so complex that people have no other choice but to, go to the pros. If anybody is running, if you're watching this video and you're running Google Ads, you have to play with the Performance Max beta. What Google's doing is where you used to run YouTube ads or Google search ads or Google Map ads or whatever, Google Display. Google's now using its entire ecosystem And basically, and Ralph, this is actually kind of analogous to Facebook. You know, with Facebook, with your placements, we used to get more granular with our Facebook placements, and now you basically you use dynamic creative to give all your creative to Facebook, and then you say, you know, basically all the placements, and then Facebook matches the creative to the proper place in the placement. Google's now doing the same thing. You give it text, image, and video assets. You provide kind of some level of targeting, but even the targeting is much, you know, it's much broader than usual. And what's happening is then you just tell Google what it is that you want. You set your goal, and Google uses the entire Google ecosystem to go try to accomplish that goal. And it's starting to identify the audience signals behind each goal accomplished, which I'm so excited about. It's smart shopping, but for lead generation. So all the stuff you've heard me say about smart shopping and, you know, how Google goes out and dynamically prospects on your behalf, like now, you know, we're using smart shopping, but it's not just for e-commerce. And I can see this, especially we talked about this before we started recording, or before we went live, the brands that are willing to really invest in solid messaging, solid copy, solid narrative. I think they're just gonna, you know, they're gonna be at the customer buffet, and it's gonna be an all you can eat. Because you have a machine learning engine that's going to deliver you all the customers that you want. And now the question is, well, does your message move them? And if the answer is no, then that's your fault. You know, it's not the advertising networks. So we just, like I said, we were accepted to the beta yesterday. We just launched our very first campaign for ourselves. So I'll have more to report on in about, I don't know, 2 weeks, I imagine, some predictive indicators, and then a month will probably be some solid data. But this could be a total game changer, especially for small business.
And that, what was it called again?
It's Performance Max.
Performance Max. Okay.
Yeah, Google Ads Performance Max. And we've got a video on our YouTube channel, not to promote our YouTube channel, but there's a video coming out here in the next day or two. My partner just basically recorded himself building out the campaign. But it's pretty cool. And I like that Google's finally offering an integrated ecosystem. You know, for so long it was like, oh, do you want to run a display ad, or do you want to run a YouTube ad? And then if you did try to bundle those things, because like if you're running a search ad inside of Google, it tries to get you to run search with display. Well, when you run search with display, you've made decisions that are search decisions that are now trying to push into a display network, and those two networks think differently. You know, when somebody's searching for something, they're articulating intent. Display means that I'm interrupting your day, and you can't advertise. You can't use the same advertising strategy in both of those contexts. Well, with Performance Max, they're taking that into account, into consideration, it seems like. So I don't know, stuff like this, like I'm just really excited to see how it goes and how it works. And not just for me as an agency, I'm excited I've been so worried about SMBs. I've been so worried about small businesses with, you know, iOS and Flock and all the other BS that's happening. The loss of data it's something that you and I get to hurdle. You know, I've got 160 clients. You've got, we were talking about your minimum ad spend. Like you've got mass amount of data, more data than most agencies will ever have. So we get to get past some of those issues. A small business, little mom and pop shop, not going to have that luxury. So stuff like this, I think actually, you know, it helps set them apart a little bit. Anyway, I feel like I'm on a soapbox.
So in Performance Max, it's a beta that's being offered to certain individuals, certain agencies, I would imagine. How do they kind of roll stuff out? I'm actually more curious.
I mean, I'm really curious myself. You get an email sometimes, and sometimes you don't. Yeah, we opted in we requested it. Google's deprioritized agency support significantly, though. The agencies used to be the tip of the spear. Bastards. Yeah, now, I know. Well, now they're going directly to advertisers, and what's funny about that is they're doing it because, and if you're watching this, just temper what I'm about to say with the fact that I do own a Google Ads agency, so I'm obviously partial. But Google's advice is flawed. It's wrong. Google tells people to do the wrong thing often. For instance, if you're on the phone with a Google conversion consultant, the very first thing they're going to do is tell you to use maximize conversions. This is a flawed bidding strategy for so many reasons. Agencies were protecting clients from making those bad decisions. The problem is Google wants you on automated bid strategies because it helps their machine learning, because then now they actually have control over the ecosystem and they get to really manage their inventory to a better degree. And so, you know, the agency Google relationship was combative by nature because the agency wants efficiency for the client. Google wants efficiency for Google. And so Google started going direct to the consumer. Every single client that I have now is also being called by Google. And I get clients
Really?
every single one, Ralph, without a single exception.
Huh.
Every single client account has a Google assigned rep. Now, how aggressive that rep is varies, and it varies by spend. I've got a client that's spending $70,000 a month. We get calls from them all the time. They call the client, they call us, they reach out, they send emails, they offer recommendations. If you ever end up on the phone with them, they're absolute bullish morons, man. Like, just, you can tell, and I'm sure they're sweet people. They don't know what they're doing. They've never actually run successful accounts. They have this playbook from Google saying, get people to run automated bid strategies, get people to basically, they want you to take your hands off the wheel and let Google learn. And in the long term, I can see why. I actually think in the long term, Google's going to be really good at it. In the short term, you're one of the casualties that they're using to learn with. You know, you're the crash dummy, basically. So it's been an interesting thing to have to contend with. And a lot of my leads come from that. A lot of my leads come from people going, yeah, I had a great campaign for 2 years. I ended up on the phone with a Google consultant. They killed my campaign. I can't bring it back. I'd say 20% of the leads that we have some story similar to that one.
Wow. That is super interesting because it's almost the exact opposite approach with Facebook.
Really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we have to ask Facebook to get our individual customer accounts like a rep just because we like the additional help. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. Our Facebook partner manager, but we've been lucky. We've had really good partner managers, which is kind of, there's no doubt about it. Like we make Facebook money. So I know like just follow the money. They're treating us well. As soon as we don't, they won't treat us well. So I get that. It is not because I'm a great guy or something, or we're on Perpetual Traffic. It's because we run a lot of ads. So anyway, having said that, they almost bend over backwards for, especially the direct response agencies, because they think that and this is their rationale. It's like we can get higher leverage. We have 40, 50 customer accounts, millions in spend, whatever. They can make more impact through going through one conduit, the agency, for all those customer accounts, as opposed to going to the individual customer accounts, which would take lots and lots of individuals. Now, some of our customer accounts have a rep, some don't. But it's almost the exact opposite. But when I think about from a manpower perspective, that makes a whole lot more sense. Like, why go after, the 6 million, business pages that are on there, or however many ad accounts, which is probably, at least I would have to actually check, but there's millions of ad accounts individually. Like, that's millions of individual people that would be going into those ad accounts. Like, why not go to one that covers all those, 40, 50, 100 ad accounts through an agency, as opposed to what Google is doing? It seems counterintuitive, and then it doesn't necessarily help.
Well, Google used to ride the Facebook train in that way. I mean, the agencies were, I think, responsible for the majority of the significant growth that Google saw, because the agencies brought in the bigger advertisers, or at least managed those bigger advertisers. I think Google is now in a position where they're trying to pivot. They want people really. Have you ever seen like the Google guaranteed listings? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Google will pick an industry, say plumbing. If you search for a plumber right now, you'll probably end up with a Google guaranteed ad. What's interesting is agencies don't run those ads. You have to have a background check. And you as the plumber you apply, you jump through these hoops, and then there's zero creative to the ad. Facebook lets you define like how many years you've been in business, what services you offer, a couple of little snippets, like, if you've won an award or something, but there's no agency work. And now it's just you and it's Google, and then every single other plumber. What scares me about that is if you think about Google's business model, they've got inventory just like anybody else has inventory. Their job is to make their inventory the most efficient. And what that means to me is if you've got 10 plumbers that want to advertise and one's the best, it's not in Google's best interest to favor the best plumber. It's in Google's best interest to make sure that all 10 plumbers get just enough leads to keep them advertising. And so they're going to take all the inventory they have and spread it out across all the plumbers they have in the way that maximizes their high water mark. And it's things like the Google guaranteed ad listing where they have complete total control. There's nothing for you to do but sit back and just say, thank you, Lord Google. That's the where the commoditization happens, and it's against our best interest.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I mean, here are these two Silicon Valley monoliths with very different approaches. Like, we just don't see any interaction on our customer accounts, our business accounts, with anything unless we sort of ask. They've taken a completely separate approach. But, I guess when you really look at it, the approaches are really in their best interest.
Yeah. It's funny, man, we're not premier partners. Google has the partner and then the premier partner, and the premier partner badge is the red one. And I'm the second highest ranked Google Ads agency in the country, and we're not premier partners. And we get people on the phone sometimes that go like, well, we only work with premier partners. Why aren't you guys premier partners? And what they don't realize is Google's premier partnership is measured according to your compliance with Google's recommendations.
Yeah.
So if you don't run a campaign the way Google says to run the campaign, then you're going to have a really tough time getting premier partner status, which means in my mind, and I'm about to lob a grenade here, if you are a premier partner, you kind of sold your soul there a little bit, because you're probably not doing things to your client's interest. You're doing things to Google's interests. But it's interesting how they've like gerrymandered that in their favor and in their direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is an element to that to Facebook too. It's, I think we're a premium level partner, but it's all about, like, we have a business, I think we have a 90-day review coming up. I just got the email from our partner manager where we go through like our compliance to their objectives. Like, we did a show this week with Angela about a new thing that Facebook is promoting. Which we'll leave that to the next show and you guys listen in. But the point is like, it was an objective. It's something that's coming from on high that the partner manager is now pushing forward. I mean, I get it. Like, she has a job, she has a boss, she has a 90-day review, an annual review, she's getting ready. Like, so we marry the two as much as possible. Like, we realize that relationship for us is a really, really important relationship, but there's some things that just don't make a whole lot of sense. Like, campaign budget optimization, which was CBO. We pushed back on that a lot, and we got dinged in our rating, as a part of the partner manager group. As a result of that, we're still at the highest level, so it's not quite as as draconian maybe as it is with Google. So there is like that little bit of a marriage there, but I'm always like, on our reviews, I'm like, all right, what do you need us to do to help you? That's how we manage our partner manager relationship, because she's getting rated on our compliance with certain objectives and certain things that Facebook is pushing. But we also have to marry that with performance for our customers. So which ones do we do? So sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no. We always are open and honest and value the relationship intensely. And it works both ways, but there's a little bit more of a give and take when it comes to that. It sounds like with Facebook as opposed to with Google, which is, if you have that badge, like, would you know immediately, well, they're complying with all these things that I don't think are correct, and their performance maybe is suffering as a result if they're a performance agency. But maybe because they're a more branded agency and aren't performance marketing, maybe they can comply and they'll get the badge and you won't. Is that sort of how it would work?
It's a little bit easier for agencies that deal with customers that have much, much, much larger spends. Like, if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, because you can hide behind spend. And I don't mean that they do. I've got some friends, Chris Brewer, who owns OMG Commerce. He's a good buddy of mine. They're a great agency. They do great work. And I think their minimum spend is for 40 grand a month or whatever. But in that threshold, it makes it a little bit easier for you to follow some of Google's directives, because now the algorithm is potentially, it's more likely to work in your favor. My average client spend is sub 10 grand a month. I can't afford to let Google learn for 90 days with a new campaign. You know what I mean? Like, let's say I carve off $2,500 and I go try to prove concept somewhere, and I want to make some manual decisions that I know are going to work, and Google doesn't want me to do that. That's the type of thing. But if you take that and cascade it across all 160 clients, like it just ends up being a nonstop combat between us and Google. My course, I shot a course for Google Ads. It's called You versus Google, because that's what I feel like it is. It's us, like, going up against the Leviathan, and seeing how well we can do.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So the higher spend Google agencies are definitely far more compliant, have the badge, but like you're serving your customer first and foremost. And I think that's, what we do as well. And I think that's the most important thing, is not necessarily to do what you're told because you're told to do it, but think about, wait a second, is this in the best interest of my customer, especially given their spend, given some of the financial constraints and marrying those with compliance to, what Google is sort of dictating to you. It's a tricky balance for sure.
Yeah. Dictating's the right word. We've got a question from Basil. Basil says, how'd you get started? How long did it take you to call your agency a proper business? Basil, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, just so you know. So if you were to watch the recording, and that's not me being dismissive, I don't want to put everybody who's watching through it again. But I'll tell you that Ralph and I both started in web dev, transferred to SEO, that's the narrative, man. It was you, me, and Tyler. All three of us were on a call from web to SEO. Tyler stayed in SEO. I think
he's stuck with SEO. Yeah, because he's smarter than us, I think.
Yeah, he actually figured it out. How long did it take for you to call your business a proper business? That's it, man. Do you have an answer to that, Ralph?
Like I guess when you describe yourself to people that you meet at a cocktail party, like I'm a consultant, and then I run an agency, or I run a business.
Yeah.
When did that actually happen? I always talked in the we as opposed to the I.
I did too.
I always wanted to say I'm a legitimate business, so I sort of faked it until I made it, kind of thing. A little bit of a Tony Robbins, kind of thing. Put the cape on and make people believe that you might be actually more successful than you really are, and then you become that person. So there was a bit of that fudging it to start, but I think when I hired my first 2 or 3 people, I realized, even though it was virtual, I was like, I run a virtual business. I started saying that as opposed to I'm just an advertising consultant, or I'm an affiliate. I guess that's when I changed. Just sort of speaking out loud, Basil. Like I was an affiliate, and I was just running other people's offers, and that's how I discovered Facebook ads. And how I discovered Facebook ads was I ran an offer for Christian Mingle.
No way.
I don't know if it's still around. I'm not Christian and I'm not single, but I knew that based upon the targeting on Facebook, it was where you live, single, married, or it's complicated, I believe it was, and then interested in men, women, or maybe there was another one. I was like, and that was the targeting, and where you lived and what your age was and what your gender was. I was like, well, that's perfect for one type of offer, dating offers. So I remember I set up my first Facebook campaign. This was all right-hand column stuff.
Yep.
And I remember I didn't set a cap, had my had my credit card in there, and literally I turned the campaign on, went up to bed, woke up like an hour later. I'm like, I should probably just check on that. I had my old laptop. I opened it up. I had spent, I think it was $3,000 without a single conversion.
Oh God.
Which was a lot of money back then. It probably wasn't $3,000. It was probably like $1,500, but it was a lot of money for me back then. And well, it still is. $1,500 is a lot of money. And I was like, instead of being pissed, I was like, holy crap, there's so much traffic on this platform. I have to figure it out. And then that was the day that I changed from being an affiliate to focusing on Facebook ads. And then I started bringing on customers. And as soon as I brought on those customers that were outside of being an affiliate, I started calling myself an agency, a business, and no longer an affiliate. So that was my translation of it. It was still, yeah.
Follow up from Basil says, how much time should you give yourself to see whether the business model works for you or the niche before moving on to something else or some other niche? Or do you just keep sticking to it forever? Never give up.
I I think if you find a niche that is working, double down on that niche. Like if you've got something, like we've got a guy in our agency accelerator group, Black-owned businesses. That's all he does. And like he came on for one call. We gave him one piece of advice. Start using the strategic account plan thing. Like heard from him ever since. It's because he used it and he doubled down on Black-owned businesses. You know, he's a Black guy. He's a guy I've known for years and years. Should I say African-American? I guess I probably should. That's more politically correct. I don't know. He doesn't care. He's a great guy, but he found that niche. I was like, holy shit. Like,
Good
it's
for him.
amazing. And he's so successful. He doesn't even come on the calls anymore. We don't even hear from him, you know? But I think he found something, and it was like, it wasn't necessarily Black-owned businesses. I think at first it was, he just tried to pay the bills, like we were talking about earlier with some of the other questions. And then he just figured out this is something that I can really market myself on. There's enough of them. The niche is big enough. And, you know, for him, he needs a dozen customers or maybe 20 customers or 30 customers to live a pretty damn good life. And he's hugely successful, which is great to see.
I think that's true for all. You know, I mean, just a handful of customers. If you want a lifestyle business, you can do that with 10.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know what business Basel is in, but I mean, from an agency perspective, you know, these are people that are paying you, you know, 4 or 5 figures a month, and you based on performance. And as long as you do a good job, they stay with you. And I think that recurring, you know, it's a big continuity model.
Yep.
You know, so that works. I mean, repeat business, I think, is a great business model just in general. I love that model. The Automatic Customer by John Warlow is a tremendous book. One of the best books I've ever read on like business models in general. So maybe that might help Basel. But yeah, I mean, I think the riches are in the niches. And I don't know who said that first. I'm going to give Russ Henneberry credit for it because I think I heard him say it the first time. But it's true, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
We've got 4 minutes left, maybe another time for a question or two. If y'all want to drop it in, we'll do some rapid fire. I wanted to comment on something you said, Ralph, that I think was interesting. I had another conversation with a gal who came onto our YouTube channel for an interview, and her name is escaping right now, which is so embarrassing. But anyway, we were talking about the entrepreneurial addiction to solving problems. And what entrepreneurs do, in my experience, is they solve a problem. Once it's solved, they move on to the next problem. The issue with that is when you go and solve a problem, that's the time to stay where you are and to profit from the fact that you solved that problem. So you're going out, you're looking for gold. As soon as you find the gold, you're like, oh, cool, I found some, and then you move on instead of like seeing how deep this vein of gold could possibly go. And I've seen that in my life to where I'm like, crap, if I had just stayed there, but I got bored. And then, you know, I moved on to the next thing instead of seeing how deep the well goes.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so true. Yeah, there's I don't have time to tell the story, but yeah, it's like the farmer who's looking for gold and leaves his farm to find gold, and then, you know, basically dies in the desert, and then another guy takes over his farm and is, you know, looking in the stream and finds this flint of gold, and he was living under a vein of gold his entire time and went to all these other places to find it, and eventually didn't make it. The point is social media and email marketing for realtors for Basel is that vein of gold, and which is a very cool niche, by the way, and then you can processize it as long as you don't get bored. But there's nothing wrong with boring money.
Yeah.
Boring
money, if you're smart, ends up not being boring at all. You find good stuff to do with it.
Right. Like if you can figure out, like in his case study after case study after case study, and make it an SOP, make it a process, and then sell that process, all of a sudden you've got a legitimate business. Like, I don't know how he does it specifically with social media and email marketing for realtors, but it's a massive niche. A lot of them don't have a lot of money. That's the issue there. Like I was talking to a guy the other day who's like trying to market to musicians. Hard niche to market to. Right. He was a consultant and now he's working at Tier 11 because they don't have any money. Artists, another one. You know, most realtors live below the poverty line. if they're actually, a full-time realtor. There's probably another statistic on that. But anyway, the point is, it's like once you find something and you're successful at it, double down on it, especially if it's a big enough niche, and you don't need tens of thousands and millions of customers to do it. You just need like a handful to create a damn good business, Kasim.
Yeah.
Which I think is what you said.
Sometimes and I'll never do this just because I don't have the temperament for it, but every now and then I've got almost 50 employees. You have more than that. Sometimes think like this would be a lot of fun to do with 2 people and 20 clients, and then I don't have to do anything. But I don't know. We just hit the hour. Basil asked a really good question. Basil, I'm going to ask you to save that for next week. We'd love to answer it. I want to dig into it. He said, where do you see the future of agencies? Do you think high ticket can survive the next 5 years? We're going to be back Friday, Basil. So show up. It's 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. I also have a link to the podcast in the description of this video. So please come check out the podcast. Ralph has been hosting it for 5 years? Are we going on 6?
Something like that. Yeah. Got to go back. But yeah, it's 5+ years.
Yeah.
Pretty
and
cool.
It's consistently one of the highest ranked marketing podcasts in the world. So come check us out, subscribe, give us some good reviews if you don't mind. We got a bad one recently that made me sad, and I'd like to. I want to bury it. So.
And just for Basil, the answer to his question is yes. It's looking good. We'll address that next week.
Yeah.
I don't want them hanging on too long for an entire week. But anyway, appreciate everybody's questions here today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. This is the most questions we've had so far. So thanks for showing up, and we'll see you all next Friday.